Jane Leavy is a widely
Wait,
recognized.
wait, 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 wait.
Okay.
Levy.
Levy.
Levy. Levy.
Okay. I will start again. Jane Leavy is a widely recognized as one of America's foremost sports writers and biographers. Jane started as a staff writer at the Washington Post from 79 to 88, covering Major League Baseball, tennis, and the Olympics. As an author, Jane Leavy books include Sandy Koufax, A Lefty's Legacy, The Last Boy, Mickey Mantle and the End of America's Childhood, and Big Fella, Babe Ruth and the World He Created. Her newest book is called Make Me Commissioner. I Know What's Wrong with Baseball and How to Fix It. Jane grew up on Long Island in Roslyn, where she pitched in the Little League and is a New York Yankee fan. Welcome to Baseball BBQ, Jane Leavy. Welcome, Jane.
Bless you, Jeff Cohane.
Isn't it funny? Jeff Cohen mispronounces your name. Listen, you know what?
Koufax got it right. The
Did
first
he?
time he called me, he said, Ms. Levy. And Ms. He did Ms.
Uh,
Ms. Levy, this is Sandy. And he went, and then he paused, because he never says his last name. He never has to say his last name.
Right.
And, and then he went, oh, Koufax, Koufax, yeah.
You
What
know,
an incredible man.
you mentioned we want to get to your book, obviously. That's why you're with us. It's called Make Me Commissioner. I Know What's Wrong with Baseball and How to Fix It. But you mentioned Sandy, and you have probably as close to anyone will get to having him participate in a book, even though he didn't do the interviews. He gave you permission, I guess, or his blessings to speak to friends. And I guess he reviewed what you wrote. I mean, since you mentioned Sandy Koufax, could you just give us a little bit of a background on that book and that experience?
Well, that phone call, reporters never expect anybody to call them back. That's first thing. And never to call back twice. So I wasn't there the first time he called. And I went, oh, you know, and I came back and I sat at my desk and waited and waited. And sure as whatever, he did call back. And I sensed something very quickly about him, which is that he's very well raised. Nice Jewish boy from Brooklyn. His mother gave him manners. So as long as I kept talking, he wouldn't interrupt. So I kept talking and talking. I told him about my kids. I told him what kind of book I wanted to write. I told him, about the house here in Cape Cod where I'm sitting. And it, it, and he listened for about an hour. And at the end of the hour, when I couldn't think of anything else to say, he said, "Well, Ms. Levy, again, getting it right, Ms. Levy, I still don't have any interest in your project. But if you want, you can come down and talk to me in Vero Beach." And I went, yes,
nice.
it's like that. Um,
Nice.
he made I wouldn't call it a deal because it's sort of, I don't know, too harsh a word. He said the first thing he said was, I really would rather this wasn't written. But if it's going to be written, I'd like it to be done right. So
Hmm.
here's what I'm prepared to do. I'm prepared to say, tell anybody who asks, yes, I said it's okay to talk to me, her. And also, he said, you can call me and I will verify any fact. It didn't mean he offered up, additional details. He didn't. If I asked him something specific, he would answer it. But and the best example is, everybody referred to him as the adopted son of Irving Koufax, his mother's second husband. Jack Braun, who was his biological father, booked when Sandy was 3. And so, I want to go sit in the Brooklyn Hall of Records for like 6 months and try to find out if I could find the adoption records of Sanford Braun? No, I did not. So I knew by then that he was such an honorable and decent man that he would tell me the truth no matter what. So, he saved me a lot of time in the Brooklyn Hall of Records. And he came to my daughter's bat mitzvah, which was
Wow.
this is a big thing in Washington.
Yes.
And I had told her the way all good Jewish parents do, oh, invite anybody, and the school, of course, had the 50% rule. If you have 50%, you got to have them all. So it was already a big crowd. And I said, "Well, invite whoever you want." So there's a stack of envelopes, and I see one addressed to him, and I go, "Oh, are you allowed to curse on this? Should
Yes,
I?"
yeah,
You
sure,
can
Oh,
say
yes.
I go,
whatever
"Oh."
you would like.
I actually said, "Oh, fuck." So, no. And I called him up and I said, "Listen, you're going to get this invitation. You do not have to come. I understand that you get a zillion of them." And he said, "This is, it still gets me." He said, "No, I'll be there for Emma. After all, I'm the guy who's taken her mother away from her for the last 3 years."
Wow. Wow. What a
This is a
mensch.
mensch.
What, yeah,
This is a mensch.
right? What a mensch.
What a mensch.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to tell Jane that we actually had lunch one day with Irene Hodges, and
Oh, yeah.
Irene tells us, she just, if she wants to call Sandy, she just picks up the phone. Like, wow, not a lot of people can just call Sandy. And
Well,
lucky.
he's told me something recently. Well, not that recently, maybe the last 5 years, that he travels with a blue blazer now wherever he goes,
Hmm.
and that's because so many of his teammates were dying.
Mm,
And by that he meant anybody who had been a Dodger.
right.
You know, that's how you defined teammates back then.
Hmm.
Right.
And that is another aspect of what's been lost in modern baseball. I think so much because of that nobody stays put. But, that example that I put in the book about what's been lost, remember Willie Davis with the three errors
Hmm.
in center field? Because it's, who was it? Was CBS or NBC scheduled that game of the World Series in sunlight, which they never played in
Right.
Dodger Stadium. And so the poor guy just completely, it's Koufax's last game and against Baltimore since 66. And they didn't go and rip him. That he went and sat down at the end of the dugout, and they both came over and made sure to embrace him. Sandy escorted him out of the dugout and down to the clubhouse, and Drysdale came out the next day, and yeah, he's won us a lot more games than that. And oppose that to the nature of the analytics, which today literally untangle what it means to be a teammate. So
Hmm.
you've got the analytics that tell you what you're worth, particularly the FIP stat,
Mm.
where what a pitcher is worth absent the screw ups of your teammates, the midges,
Yeah.
the wind that picks up, the pebble in the dirt. And it's so contrary to what the ethos of the game that I grew up watching. And I miss that. I really miss that.
Yes. Like I said, before we started recording, I really love this book. Just a lot of information in here on what's wrong with baseball and how you can fix it. By the way, you got my vote to be commissioner. Absolutely. I don't know
Thank
where
you.
to start, but I think I'm going to start. You write about Clayton Kershaw with the perfect game into the first start in 2022, and perfect game into the seventh inning, and he's taken out after 80 pitches. I call this the Johan Santana effect because when Johan pitched a no hitter for the Mets in 2012, he pitched 134 pitches. All right, eight of those were intentional walks, like 126 pitches, and his career really ended up a few starts after that. He never was the same.
Right.
Everybody's blaming it's the number of pitches, and I don't believe that at all. But Clayton Kershaw, a perfect game. We're not going to see a perfect game anymore, are we?
No, no. And what's the likelihood you're going to see 20 strikeouts either?
Right.
You know, um, I think that's the narrative thread question. Baseball used to have storylines that would play out through a game, through a series, through a season, and often through look at the Dodgers and the Yankees in the 50s, through a decade. And those are gone. And they're gone because uh, analytics have vitiated the elements of the story. So you don't have matchups anymore.
Right.
You don't go out to the ballpark to see, Kershaw play against Madison Bumgarner. You don't do that because there's nobody matching up anymore. You don't go to see, Greg Maddux and Tony Gwynn because there's never that many at bats anymore. So it's when it and this is obviously not something anybody contemplated, and I'm not sure it's something anybody's really thought out, but that's what held baseball together, and it's what held the attention, the affection, and I think respect of fans. And that's just gone. Analytics don't tell good stories.
Mm-mm.
They're numbers. They don't have a soul.
Right.
And they don't tell stories.
We used to go to the games and oh, who's pitching today? Today I go, who's not pitching today? That's
Right.
the way to go now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who's not pitching today? Right.
Jane, in the book, talk about no hitters and perfect games. You had a great point because, and Jeff brought up the no hitter, and the Mets had what people were saying is one more no hitter, five pitchers combined for a no hitter. And me personally, I was like, no, to me, it has very little meaning. That's not a no hitter. And in the book, you mentioned, and you said the one pitcher pitches a no hitter, and then the team combined, you did a play on words there. What was it exactly? It was a one
I
pitcher.
actually think you're quoting Joel Sherman, and it was the day after Christian Javier pitched against, held the Phillies
Yeah.
hitless
But it
for
was in your
six
book. It
innings.
was in the
Yes,
book.
it's six
Yeah.
innings in Game 4 of the 2022 World Series. And aside from the fact that nobody batted an eye when Dusty Baker took him out, so what if he had not allowed any hits? So what if his father predicted, no, it was his mother predicted he would throw a no-hitter that day? It was the obvious and accepted move of the moment. And, Joel pointed out in the New York Post the next day perfectly, there's a difference between a no-hitter and not allowing any hits. And, one's single accomplishment
Right.
that people go to the ballpark and say, could I possibly see one of those? Not anymore. Not happening.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, you know, baseball, the three of us are kind of in the same, we love what baseball was, but now and you had great ideas in your book, but I wonder, like Jeff's nickname on the show is Old Coot. Okay.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty self-explanatory. Um, and sports, you've got some sports that like boxing. Boxing used to be huge, right? Boxing is now, very, very rare that you have a fight that gets people's attention. Horse racing used to be huge, and now it's basically relegated to the three big races. Right? Is it three or whatever? And I fear that might be what's happening with baseball. It is possible because it's regional, and if they don't do something about it, we could very well see baseball become like other sports and those other sports that I mentioned. And it's scary, but that could very well be the case.
Well, of course, boxing is lethal, so it's understandable that it has lost its adherents, and the tolerance for the richness and the riches of the horse owners is limited these days, and also for what they do to horses. The animal rights movement has not exactly helped thoroughbred racing,
Hmm.
but Roy Eisenhart, who I talked to at great length, and he was one of my wise men. He was the guy who ran the Oakland A's in the 80s for his father-in-law, Walter Haas. And, he talks about exactly the issue you've raised. Baseball has so much inventory. It has so many games, so many seats to fill, and seemingly no ability or willingness to figure out a different way to fill them. Um, I think the intransigence, the Edward Albee relationship between the union and management, and as I wrote in the book, when Marvin Miller, created free agency and established the rights of players, and it became, the baseball players got the best deal of all, but he did it for more than one sport. I remember thinking, why isn't he representing the newspaper guild? I'd like to have him on my side. But things have evolved. And I don't know, it's not going to be popular. Bryce Harper isn't going to like me in the morning, but they have to give a little. Both sides have to give a little here. Roy says, the problem is systemically, by mid-April, if not earlier, that, half the teams are not going to be competitive. There's not a prayer anymore for those teams. And I guess Manfred's recent solution, which is to create mini divisions where you put small market teams together so they can beat up on each other and one of them will have a chance to win something, is it's a shanda. I think you know what I mean by that.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
For those who don't know, that's what our grandmothers would call a shame, something
Right.
shameful.
It's a Shonda.
Yes, yes.
Take a look at there's a piece in The Athletic where somebody came up with a better, reconfiguration. Um, sure, yeah, I don't care about saving the owners money on the travel.
Right.
They got plenty of dough. I'm not worried about them, even the poor ones. But it's hard on their bodies. This is a dislocating experience to be, careening between hotels and dime zones. So there is a logic to trying to make things not so crazy. I mean, it was a sport created before airplanes, almost before. No, not trains existed, but so there is a logic to wanting to think through, what the implications are now of the travel for the players and and the length of the season, frankly. I mean,
Hmm.
it's probably too long. And if, as somebody wrote in The Athletic, if you go to this system that Manfred, as Jason Stark advocates, you're going to have to cut the season. Well, that doesn't bother me. I think it
Hmm.
should be cut down. I think it's too long at this point. But please, God, no, not those divisions and expansion. Do we really need the talent diluted any more than it already is?
I know, right? I agree 100%. The dilution of talent, if we bring in more teams, but it's going to happen. I want to follow up on something you said about the being hard on their bodies with the travel and things. The pitchers these days are throwing harder and harder. They're not lasting as long. They're getting more and more Tommy John surgeries. They don't care about that. I mean, we know that they can't go. They throw as hard as they want, and yet they know they're going to have surgery eventually. What's that mindset? I mean, why can't they just know that don't throw 100 miles an hour all the time? I remember Tom Seaver's my favorite pitcher. I know he saved stuff in the tank. So when he needed something in the sixth, seventh, eighth inning, he whip it out, whatever.
Right.
They don't do
That's
that
a
anyway.
lovely phrase.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, I know, right?
Okay. Yeah.
I might have to edit that one out. But they throw harder and harder, and they don't last very long, and they more and more surgeries.
Well, I think that, ownership regards them as fungible.
Yeah.
And so you lose one, 6'5", 220-pound guy who can throw 100 miles an hour, and you replace it with another one. Nobody knows who they are. They're nameless and faceless. I mean, that too is a loss. Are we going to see another Pedro Ramos, another Mariano Rivera?
Hmm.
No, we are not. And again, that's a personality, and that was a the personality of the job, I mean.
Hmm.
And I don't even know what to say. Look, the Tommy John stuff is, in my view, one of the really great, aside from the fact that it's tearing arms and people's lives apart, and the numbers are, I counted recently, there's 50 more since, at least 50 more since January 1st.
Hmm.
So they haven't made a dent in it. And the reason they haven't made a dent in it is because structurally, the game is wired such that it's economically important to players to throw 100 miles an hour. When ownership starts paying for guys who know how to move the ball around and change speeds like the old timers did, you know, then the people will pitch differently. But when I was at Driveline, the famous Driveline, where it's the first data-driven training center, and I started talking about, and I brought up Greg Maddux, they all started laughing at me. Oh, that guy couldn't get anybody out today. I'm like, and he got the calls off the plate, 8 inches, and blah, blah, blah. You couldn't function today. He could function today if the rules and the unwritten rules of what they pay for
Hmm.
changed. And if you're a young guy and you're to the point where you're on the precipice of Major League Baseball, and this is your one chance to do it, more and more they're going to do it. They're
Hmm.
just going to take that chance and figure, I'll get better. I mean, Buck Showalter was a little cynical on that. He said, they go on the IL and they get paid while they're doing it. They come back and then they have another surgery. I think it was 150 so far. The most famous of whom is Otani, obviously,
Right.
who's had two surgeries. Um, and speaking of which, if I were him, I wouldn't be pitching for the Los Angeles Dodgers right now. Look at that track record. Look at how many people they've
Yeah,
had
right.
sitting on the IL. It's not quite as many as the Yankees, but one of them spent more money on fewer people. I can't keep track of it all. But again, it's tearing the fabric of the game apart. How can you root for somebody? How can you expect somebody to come out to the ballpark and spend what it now costs to buy a beer, for God's sake, and say, but you can't expect to see the players. You can't root for somebody who isn't going to be there. And that gets to the problem of the lack of stars and a lack of understanding that's important, that you want to help make stars. A cynic and my buddy Dan Okrent, who created rotisserie league baseball, and I blame everything on him for that. He says, well, they don't really care. They want the leverage. So get hurt. We don't care. It's like, we'll just replace you with another guy. There's 1,000 of you. And um, and I'm afraid I agree with him.
We're speaking to Jane Leavy. The book is Make Me Commissioner. I Know What's Wrong with Baseball and How to Fix It. And one of the ways that you propose fixing it and generating interest for future generations is to involve children who are up to age 10, maybe up to age 12. I think you said 10. And to do something where you are giving them a ticket with an adult to get into a game, maybe giving them a free popcorn, ice cream, whatever. And it's a great point because I went to a Yankee game this past week and they were playing the Nationals. Now,
Boy,
right, kids don't care though. If a kid goes to the game, they don't care who the Yankees are playing. They're just to be there. I remember when I was a kid, I didn't care. I just wanted to be at the stadium. But there were a lot of empty seats. And I'm sure that there's a lot of kids that would love to go. And if they're trying to build the game and appealing to future generations, where they're, how they're doing the pitch clock and, speed of the game and all that, your idea about the tickets is a great idea. Could you just
thank you.
tell us a little about that? You're welcome.
So basically, they need to grow a new generation of fans. And the statistics of how many kids are playing baseball are not particularly encouraging. MLB has been trumpeting stats that show an increase in the number overall of people playing baseball, and that's great. lovely. But when you look at the particulars and the fine print, you find that a lot of the increases among people who play maybe 1 to 13 times a year, right? Now, so of that 17 million that they cited recently as their big increase, 9 million were people who went to a company picnic, pulled a hamstring, and never never got up to bat. But I was one of those people, so I know about them. Um, so they need a new generation, and they have all this empty acreage. I mean, I'm not saying give them the seats behind home plate that cost $300, which is uh, also a shanda, but
Hmm.
okay. As Mike Rizzo said to me before he got canned, and I will go to my grave saying nobody can win with that ownership, but fill it up. Fill it up. If your grandpa, takes a 10-year-old to the game and he gets what, a $12 ticket for free for the kid, he's going to spend 4 times that on buying that kid everything that kid wants. And I actually had a friend of mine who's an economist, professor at University of Wisconsin La Crosse, one of the great people in baseball, Mike Haupert, run numbers at the Cubs. And these were from, I think, 2023. But if Grandpa buys him the small size hot dog, the small soda, um, I think it was cotton candy or popcorn or something, and a cap. You know, the Cubs, and they had done that for all these kids, the Cubs would have lost a total of $4 million that year, while they were paying Jason Hayward $21 million to play for the Dodgers. So, it's chump change to
Yeah,
these guys. And what a PR coup that would be. Just imagine. We want these kids back. And when they get there, is that a dog in the background?
that
Because
is.
mine is right here, by the way. Is that two dogs?
Two dogs, yes.
Hey, guys. Uh, I will tell you a funny story about my dog today. But anyway, you want the kids to want to come back. You want to make it an intimate relationship. One of the things people ask me all the time is, "Oh, you have too much about the Savannah Bananas in the book." I don't really think so. Jesse Cole, the man in the yellow tux, was honed in on the fact that baseball had lost its way, specifically in the relationship or the lack therein between players and fans. So I watched a game pretty early on, maybe 2023, where one of the guys in those iridescent, silly baseball suits climbed into the stands and sat with a little boy. I have a picture of it I could send you. It's a kid, the look on the kids' faces. And the guy asks the little boy, "Do you want to sign my uniform?" Now think about that reversal of roles. You
Hmm.
know, you're making the kid feel important and you're saying, "You matter to me." And their assistant head coach of the Bananas is a reformed lawyer named Viro. And Viro looks at me and he says, "That kid just became a baseball fan." And
Yes.
baseball needs to get off its and start doing some of that stuff. You know,
You,
I,
you,
I'm
you,
sorry, go ahead.
you had a great point in here, a designated autographer. That's a great idea. Someone who's on the IL, maybe a pitcher who's not going to be pitching that day, and sign an autograph for the kids. That's a great idea.
The other one that I can take no credit for, it's Dave Roberts' idea, and think it'll make total sense to you, is when you were a kid, or certainly when I was, I wanted to get to the ballpark when the gates opened,
Hmm.
so that I could see batting practice,
Yep.
so I could
Oh
see
yeah.
Mickey Mantle tee off, on whatever junk or slop was being thrown at him, and this goes back to the travel situation. Because of the travel, they inverted it. So now, if you get to the ballpark when the gates open, the only team you're going to see hit is the opponent.
Hmm.
You can't
Yep.
see your own guys.
That's right.
Now, that's also because your own guys, many of them, are busy taking batting practice downstairs with a new traject machine, batting against an avatar that doesn't make mistakes, right, and doesn't get a tired arm. Um, but I think players ought to be required to do this. I mean, really, what is the problem?
I know,
And,
right?
I told this to one to Mike Rizzo too, and he said, "Oh, well, the union isn't going to like that." They said, "Well, the union, get with the program, guys. They need to reform their attitude towards the fans, and that's what the Bananas got right. Fans first, entertainment always."
Hmm. I just want to say the union and management, and the owners and the union, they got to work together. Never going to happen. At least I don't think it's going to happen, but they got to get together.
When I'm commissioner,
Yes, yes.
just watch, just watch.
I want to change the subject a little. I was reading in the book. You spoke to Marquise Grissom and the Marquise Grissom Baseball Association. That was, I mean, I know we have an African American problem in baseball with only, I think, what, 6% now. When I know in the 70s it was 20%. But he's trying to bring back. I know that Major League Baseball has the RBI program, but what Marquise Grissom is doing is just fantastic.
And he's not the only one. I when I was talking to, I guess it was Leo Mazzoni who told me go talk to Marquise and see what he's doing in Georgia. And there are about four or five guys currently playing in the big leagues who came out of Marquise's program.
Hmm.
And he's tough. He's tough on those kids. But and there's a cohort of black men, some of whom were, drafted and got to maybe, I don't know, class C or something, but who are committed to raising a new generation of black athletes. Manford knows there's a problem, and Major League Baseball knows there's a problem. And so they built the Jackie Robinson training complex at the former
Yep.
Dodger
Hmm.
town. It's a beautiful facility. But I was sitting there with this guy named Darwin Penny, who ran the Kansas City Royals baseball academy for years and then became a scout. And I said, the question is this a one-off? Is this like a showpiece, like a model house in Levittown?
Hmm.
Somebody will know what that is on Long Island. And or is it an example of what needs to be everywhere? And I believe it needs to be everywhere. There's actually about four or five of them now that are Major League Baseball affiliated. But you know what? Take the damn money you're making from gambling, which you shouldn't be profiting from to begin with, and use it to build academies equivalent to the ones in the DR
Hmm.
that they
Yep.
all have. Give our kids as much of a chance to make it as those kids have.
Absolutely.
Jane, you want to mention the Ghost Runner.
Ugh.
Okay. Yeah, I know. And we all feel the same way. When there before I get to that, when the pitch clock came out, I was opposed to it. And I was wrong because the pitch clock has definitely it's made a tighter game. It's definitely it's a good thing. I didn't like that there was any kind of time in baseball, but I was good with that. But the Ghost Runner, that and you talk about it in the book, uh, and obviously you don't like it, but could you tell us how, as commissioner, you would just take it away, or what would you do about extra inning games now?
Well, the thing that shocked me when I went and looked at the figures of extra inning games over the last, I don't know, number of years, most close to 70%, I think, I'm not looking at the book at the moment, end after 10 innings in the 10th inning. It's like legislating for a problem that isn't as bad as they're making it out to be. So yes, I get that it wrecks their travel schedule. Yes, I get that it wrecks their bullpen for a week. But of course, I have another solution for that. Um, but it destroys what made baseball baseball. It's one thing to make, okay, the designated hitter, yeah, we're all used to that. But the point of baseball was you had to earn your way. Nobody just said, okay, go to second for the hell of it. I mean, that ended in Little League, right?
Hmm.
Um, so my thought, and I talked to Roger Angel, a wonderful late writer for the New Yorker about this. I mean, he was aghast. He just couldn't believe it. And he said, and for God's sakes, if they're going to do it, at least, put the guy on first base, not second. And because that changes the whole dynamic of the way you have to play, right? I know analytics says it's actually better to be on first base than second base, and I still can't figure out the reasoning for that, but okay. But how many games have you watched where suddenly Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton have to shorten up on their swings? They can't do it.
They won't do it.
And no, I don't think they can,
Oh,
honestly. Um, they won't and they can't. But so it distorts completely the nature of the game as it's meant to be. That pisses me off. And so Roger and I came to an agreement on this that what would be really helpful would be to at least extend the game, let it play through and end organically, like baseball is supposed to, in the 13th inning. Let them go through the batting order one more time because almost all the games will end by then.
right.
Now, it still means that you're losing Marichal and Spawn at the stick at 62, and some of the other great, the Pawtucket game, Dan
Uh-huh.
Barry's about the 33
33
inning
innings.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great book. And those are the things baseball people talk about, you know. It's another thing that they've lost because of the need to monetize everything and the need to make everything more efficient. I mean, efficiency is you know, it's the mode of operations of analytics. That's the
Yeah.
whole idea.
You spoke to some wonderful people in the book. I mean, old time baseball people who know what they're talking about, has the knowledge. I'm talking about you spoke to Dusty Baker, Buck Showalter, Bill Spaceman Lee,
Hmm.
Ron Washington. These guys, they really have so much experience. Tell us about your conversations with them.
Well, um, I think Dusty Baker was the most human in baseball. Universally respected, which is, of course, why the Houston Astros, in that moment of extremis when everybody hated them for the sign stealing scandal, why they went and got him. Um, and he has such a depth of experience that I wanted to talk to him. In fact, I think I said to him, I said, what happened to empiricism in baseball? And he said, I'm going to botch this a little bit. He says, it's unbelievable, Jane. It, you know, I, I'll tell them what I see. I'll tell them what I see with my eyes, and they'll say to you, well, your eyes are wrong. Well, these eyes had seen everything over and over and over again. He knew which way the ball bounced. He
Hmm.
knew which way the ball spun. To say that experience and wisdom, and the accumulation of knowledge is insignificant makes me insane. And it clearly made Dusty insane. But it's not only about baseball, I mean, look what's happening out there.
Hmm.
Let's just get rid of all those cancer doctors who were on the brink of figuring things out. So he was absolutely wonderful. And I asked him who would be the best guy to talk to about the change in hitting imposed by analytics. And he said Bregman, which was, a lot of people still hold him in not great esteem because of that his participation in the sign stealing. He is a great guy. He's a wonderful guy and a nice Jewish boy. And I'm going to tell you a funny story because you're Jewish and you'll get
Yep.
it.
Hmm.
So there's a chapter called Boychik.
Hmm.
Now, it shouldn't be that hard to figure out what Boychik means, right? The copy editor of this book comes back to me with a paragraph. I mean, like a page long kind of paragraph about how he's looked everywhere. And, even in old baseball encyclopedias, and he cannot find a boy chick anywhere in Major League Baseball. And I'm like, oh my gee. I mean, nor had he heard of Pepper. So when I said as a question, with or pepper.
Hmm.
He was like, no, there's no with or pepper in the encyclopedia either. It drove me nuts. But Bregman's very smart about hitting, and he's a good example to look at because he came in exactly when Statcast did. And the first thing that happened to him when he got, drafted number two, and the first thing they tell him is you have to change your swing. No more hitting down on the ball and trying to, outrun it. No more backspin. You have to stay in the plane of the pitch, which is, of course, what Ted Williams advocated many years ago. This is not a radical idea,
Hmm.
but it does require your body to move in a very different way. And when you think about it, he took three, he doesn't have big hands. He's not a huge guy. So when he hits home runs, there's a lot of leverage and at work there, but he takes three balls and he tries to hold them together and he's showing me, it's so logical, but the visual helped. If your swing is like that, right, you're just going to intersect, the ball is just going to intersect with the bat in one place briefly. If your bat is in the plane of the pitch, then you've got basically three ball lengths to connect with it. Maybe it's not going to be flush in every place, it's not going to be barreled up in every place, but it increases your chance of hitting the ball solidly, cleanly. And it was very helpful for him to show me that and for him to show me the weight shift. And the thing that was so touching, he said, and what happens to him when he gets messed up, which clearly he has, is he hasn't really had a season like 2019. Since then, he said that he felt he lost it in 2020 and has been trying to get it back ever since. He said, when I get messed up, it's because my body reverts to moving in the way that it was taught to move before StatCast came along
Hmm.
and said, no, you have to do it this way. And I think StatCast and Ted Williams had a point here. I think they were right, but to have to completely relearn what you knew how to do, which is what a lot of guys have had to do. And he was very articulate and very helpful.
Hmm.
Jane, this book, you had me right at the beginning of this book, and we benefit from your experience. I mean, right? This is page two. I guess you were at Cal Ripken's historic game,
I was.
and you're talking about being there. And I'm just going to read this paragraph that had me because because you mentioned Shonda and Anderson's foul ball adopted a downward trajectory by the time it got to our section, heading straight for my pupic. My pupik. I
Like
should say it. Pupik, the
puppet.
Yiddish word for belly button. I knew that one, which my grandmother had transposed to further south of the equator. And so it landed, smack dab between my thighs, and I squeezed it tight. It was the best catch I ever made. And then, while admiring my trophy and my dexterity, I felt a hand reaching for the ball. Some guy across the aisle had vaulted over the black railing, dividing the concrete steps in an attempt to snatch the ball from my, well, you get the idea. And that's page two. And this book is almost 400 pages. So this is gold. I just tell everybody, you want to read a phenomenal book. It's called Make Me Commissioner. I know what's wrong with baseball and how to fix it. Our guest is Jane Leavy. And before we started recording, Jane was telling us a great recipe. We are baseball and barbecue. And I said I wanted to get to this. So, Jane, it was a great recipe for with burgers. If you could
Yes.
please, our listeners will love hearing this.
So what you do, and it's based on an old New York Times Molly O'Neill recipe. People don't eat like this anymore, but they should. Okay. You take a ball of butter and Dijon mustard. You make it like a golf ball kind of thing, and you freeze it. But my addition, my improvement on her recipe was to add truffle powder. So you put it all together, you freeze it, and when you make the patties, you put it in the middle and protect it. And when it gets on the grill, it the ball explodes into the meat, and you get this incredible taste. It also smells pretty good. But you got to get really good beef. You don't want to mess around with the bad stuff. And I actually made them for a book party once. It was fun, a lot of fun. It's a fabulous recipe. But you have to have the truffle powder.
So are you a big griller? Do you do barbecue low and slow? I mean, what kind of outdoor cook are you?
I'm a complicated outdoor cook. I live in Washington, D.C., and up
Mhm.
here in Truro, Massachusetts, where I'm an adherent of the Orleans Firebirds of the Cape Cod League. They live about 20 minutes from me.
Hmm.
And I do a lot more grilling up here in the summer. I have to admit that I'm using, I'm not no green egg for me. I'm using an automatic starter and stuff. Um, the wind is such up here that I have to be careful. Um, I love doing spatchcock chickens. I mean,
Okay.
last night I made okay, this is another good recipe that I made up. You take lime juice, uh, probably about 2/3 of Rose's lime juice, the sweetened stuff that you use to make a vodka gimlet, and the rest of it fresh squeezed. And you combine it with a little olive oil, tarragon, chopped onion, and hot chili flakes, and you marinate chicken parts in it for like overnight, right? And then you put them on, but you don't, no center, no center light, no center flame. It's so that a lot of it is indirect.
Indirect. Okay.
And my son actually did the grilling last night. He did a fabulous job. It's like you can't stop eating it. It's really it's good.
Let me get
Make
back
it
to.
for you. I'll make it for
Oh,
you.
great.
Did
Okay.
you
There you go.
wait? I'll take you up on that
Uh-huh. There you
invitation.
go.
You got it, guys.
You mentioned you're in Cape Cod, and you do talk about the Cape Cod League in your book. I believe there's what, 3 or 4 chapters on it. And there's college leagues around the U.S., and the Cod League is probably the best known. Uh, what makes the Cape Cod League so special? And before you answer that, I know Major League Baseball tried bullied the Cape Cod League as well. So please tell us about the Cape Cod League.
So it's a summer league for college players who are going into the draft, and where they have to actually learn and show that they could hit with a wooden bat. Um, and that's what makes it attractive to scouts, and what makes it was like a showcase before there were showcases, right? And so you get the best college talent playing in these idyllic little ballparks. The one in Orleans is particularly beautiful. It's built in a natural hollow, and baseball's been played there since 1913. And when I started coming here with my kids, they could still run onto the field between innings and catch fireflies.
Mm.
Now that's gone away because of the netting that, litigious world that we live in. The netting means that you can't get through onto the grass anymore. Um, but people are sitting there. There's no prices, right? There's a voluntary raffle, 50-50 raffle. Uh, it, it's all run by all volunteers. The woman who's the GM for the Firebirds is Miss Sue Horton, and known everywhere as Miss Sue. There was a huge piece on her last year in the Boston Globe. Cape Crusader, Miss Sue, the Cape Crusader. So it's Hamisha. How do you say that? The kids, the the guys live with host families.
Hmm.
Plus, Buck Showalter in 1976 was the MVP and batting champion. He got lucky. His host family ran a rental car agency, and he had a Chrysler Cordoba with Corinthian leather for the summer. Best summer of his life, he said. Um, so they actually, you watch these guys, they actually have to rake the field. They have to help put down the lines. They're doing the basics that are required to learn what baseball means and how hard it is, the particulars that make, a field and a game. And the guy who's the manager for them, Kelly Nicholson, has been the manager since 2005. He's a lovely, lovely guy. And it's getting harder and harder to create teams because the portal and the fact that people are like vying for college kids now and moving the draft to when they did means that there's very little incentive for kids to stay the whole season. And where you once could really forge a team and a sense of team identity, it's going south. I mean, 2 years ago, the Catuit Kettleers had 40 different kids come in and out. The Firebirds only lost 19 that year, and it was the least in the league. So it is changing. And when he put on the shift, I was ready to kill him. I said, Kels, what are you doing? He said, I want to win. And that really depressed me. It hurt me deeply.
Jane, this has nothing to do with the book or anything, but what you just said, am I the only one who, when you talk about real Corinthian leather, all I could hear is Ricardo Montalban and saying, it has a real Corinthian leather. I mean, right?
I have a picture of Buck in his Hyannis Mets uniform. And he wanted to come up for the summer and go to a game with me. So did Palmer, as a matter of fact. But the summer got screwy, so I missed. Arrived just in time for the playoffs, and my Birds won the President's Cup for the best record in the league and got bounced out in the first round of the playoffs. But so be it. They were a team. They were really a team, and I love seeing that.
Yeah. It's hard to believe what Major League Baseball did, though. I mean, instead of having teams that would have their names reflected, they had to be petty, and instead, what was it? They were going to charge money for the teams to use their name, or there was something,
So
right?
yeah, it's a perfect example. I'm really glad you brought it up. In 2009, they issued an edict. A lot of the teams had major league names. There were the Cardinals. My Firebirds were Cardinals, and there were the Mets, and there were the Red Sox, and there are the Mariners. Who am I forgetting? There's a couple of more, but anyway, so in 2009, the off season, they informed this is a nonprofit league, right? So they informed the teams that if they don't use official major league merch, that they have to surrender their major league name. Now, that is not only petty, but it's short-sighted. Why wouldn't you want 1,000 kids running around in Cardinals t-shirts, right?
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's just so stupid. The Mets became the Harbor Hawks. Um, Chatham became the Anglers, I think. The Red Sox had to stay the Red Sox because if they had changed their name up here in Red Sox territory, that people would have killed them. And the Mariners didn't have to do anything because they preceded the Seattle Mariners. So they were there. We still have Mariners, but it's the kind of short-sighted thinking. Why wouldn't you think it's in Major League's interest to have these teams promoting the teams that you want people to follow? For what amount of money? I get the principle. I used to be married to a lawyer. I understand. You're not supposed to, it's intellectual property, blah, 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 blah. Stop. You don't have to monetize everything.
Everything. Yeah.
only common sense. It's just going to grow your brand, grow your game, and you don't have to pay anything. Obviously, I agree. Jane, we really appreciate your time. I have one last question, and we can go on all night because this book is absolutely fantastic. You talk about the flip play, the Derek Jeter flip play
Yeah.
in the book, and that was like kind of the beginning of the Statcast era. Could you explain that?
Um, Actually, so Jeter, as we will remember, makes this incredible play in the third game of the American League Division Series between the Yankees and the Oakland A's. The Yankees had lost 2 games at home. This is 2001, and everything about that postseason was going to be tinged by 9/11, particularly games played in New York. So they go to Oakland, and Mike Mussina is the starter for the Yankees. He's pitching a one hitter, right? Um, and the A's send up a pinch hitter to a lefty because Joe Torre doesn't stir. He doesn't even think about taking out Mike Mussina in the seventh inning. And Terrence Long hits this vicious line drive that somehow managed to evade Tino Martinez's glove and go through the bullpen, which was then on the field, rattle around in the deep in the corner of what was then was it Oakland Alameda County Stadium, I think. Um, and Shane Spencer is playing out in right field in place of uh, Paul O'Neill, who's near the end of his career and he'd been hurt and da da da. So he unloads this, this throw. As Kim Ng said, he didn't even crow hop. He unloads and he throws it over the heads of two cutoff men. And Jeter is of course playing for a pull hitter, but he's not in a shift. We didn't have shifts. And from his position, he can see everything. He can see the panorama of the play unfolding. Jeremy Giambi, who is slow as a freight train, is on first base. Why Art Howe didn't send in Eric Burns, who was asked to get ready to pinch run, nobody knows. And certainly not Eric. And Jeter sees what's happening and he takes off from his position at shortstop, crosses the diamond between second and the mound in time and runs across the field in time to intercept this errant throw in the just about in the first baseline, and to flip it backhand to Jorge Posada, who is blocking the plate expecting to get clobbered by Giambi. And with, you could slide into somebody then, remember? But
Oh yeah, I
yeah,
can't do it
but he
now.
didn't. And there's no replay. So, that makes for this delicious argument. Would he have been saved? Should he have been saved? Why didn't he slide? Da 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 da. So the guys at in MLB were at the time working on the system that became Pitch FX, which was the first step in making it possible in tracking a tracking system that made it possible to know exactly where a pitch, that question, where was the pitch?
Hmm.
We know exactly where the pitch was now, thanks to all this fancy technical stuff. And so they're working on that system, and then it's a Saturday night game, and they come in on Monday, and the CEO, Bob Bauman, comes in and he's irate. Why can't you show me how this was possible? Nobody could believe Jeter. Where did he come from? Where the fuck did he come from? And they couldn't document it. They couldn't show what happened. So they knew right then that what they were working on, as radical as it was, and it certainly changed pitching a great deal when it came in all stadiums, they knew right then it was already obsolete. And they started working on the StatCast system, which tracked not just pitching, but batting. And where they could answer Bob Bowman's question. The ball went here, then it went here, then it went here. This was the angle, this was the speed, and they could reconstruct it. So the irony of Jeter's play is that it created StatCast, which did more to create and entrench analytics than anything else.
Yep. Yeah, yep. And yeah, and I guess we all have to live with it from now on, I guess. So thank you, Derek Jeter.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. He wouldn't talk to me. I don't know why.
Really. Mm.
Yeah, couldn't get a hold of him.
Well, Jane, we really appreciate your time. I know you gave us more than you could. It's just so great. The book is called Make Me Commissioner. I Know What's Wrong with Baseball and How to Fix It, coming out in September 9th, I believe.
It is, yes.
And
Please, guys, if you can't make me commissioner, make me rich.
yes.
Buy the book.
Yeah.
Buy a lot of them.
Available at all your local places, Barnes and Noble and Amazon. You have a website, janelevy.com,
Right?
and go there for all the information. And Jane, thank you very much for joining us on Baseball and BBQ.
For the
Thank you.
anybody, for a guy for the Guyland, it's anytime.
Thank you
Thank you
so much, Jane. This
Jane.
was a pleasure.
Yes,
Thank you, guys. Really nice to know you.
same here.
Call me anytime.
Okay,
Thank
All
you.
right.
thank you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.